Today's lesson is From Yellow Journalism to Fake News. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike.
And I'm Candice.
And yes, here we are with day 2 of our look at the history of bad reporting, basically. Fake news, yellow journalism, as it used to be known back in the 18th century. Today, fake news, that's a term that Donald Trump popularized to talk about news stories that I don't know if they were always fake when he called them fake news. They were usually stories that made him look bad or criticized him in small or big ways. But it is a term that he kind of popularized. And with the rise of news on the internet, it has actually become more of a problem than it used to be. When we had fewer sources of news, a lot of them were much more balanced. They were forced to kind of deliver both sides of a story. But today, with sort of the wide open media news marketplace we have, there's a lot more room for that fake news to slip through. So let's listen to the first part of today's lesson, which is going to look at how yellow journalism developed into fake news.
The yellow journalism phenomenon reached its peak during the late 1890s, in the run-up to the Spanish-American War. Both papers deliberately invented stories that drummed up bad feelings toward Spain, even wrongly blaming the country for sinking a U.S. ship. When the U.S. went to war with Spain in 1898, many saw yellow journalism as a primary factor.
大家好，第一部分我们看到副词 deliberately 指故意的、蓄意的。例如 On the lake, Martin deliberately tipped over the boat so that his friend would fall into the water. 在湖面上 Martin 故意将船翻倒，这样他的朋友就会掉进水里。或是 Maybe I'm just suspicious, but my boss might be deliberately trying to undermine my work. 也许我只是多疑，但我的老板可能在蓄意破坏我的工作。另外补充这个字的形容词 deliberate, D-E-L-I-B-E-R-A-T-E, deliberate, 表示蓄意的或是故意的。像是 Ralph made a deliberate attempt to sabotage the project. Ralph 蓄意暗中破坏这个计划。或是 Dennis made a deliberate error to allow his sister to win the game. Dennis 故意犯错，好让他的妹妹赢得游戏。接着我们看到片语 drum up, 指鼓动或是激起某事的意思。举例来说 The politician tried to drum up support for the new law by giving a speech. 这名政治人物试图借由演讲来鼓动大家对这项新法案的支持。或是 The political candidate is holding several events to drum up support from voters. 这名政治候选人正在举行几场活动，以激发选民的支持。
The first line reads, The yellow journalism phenomenon reached its peak during the late 1890s in the run-up to the Spanish-American War. So at that time, there were lots of tensions and bad feelings, and these two competing newspapers used that to maximum effect. So they tried to make money and sell newspapers by creating bad feeling about the Spanish-American War. So run up to, when we talk about the run up to something, it means the period before or the events before something happens. So before the war actually broke out, there were lots of events that might have happened, and that is what we refer to as the run up to the Spanish-American War.
So both of these papers, it says both papers. Now we're referring back to day 1 when we talked about these two New York papers that were engaged in a very tough fight for readership and for newspaper sales. So they were competing against each other by printing fake news and very sensationalist articles. It says both papers deliberately invented stories that drummed up bad feelings towards Spain, even wrongly blaming the country for sinking a U.S. ship. Wow, that's incredible. So they kind of created the war or made people believe that things between America and Spain were much worse than they actually were. And of course, once everyone in America got excited and got angry about Spain, that kind of forced the politicians into doing something. This wasn't done by accident. This was done on purpose or deliberately, as we say in the article. If you do something deliberately, you do it thinking about it. You plan to do it. You want to do it. You intend to do it. It's not accidentally, where it just happens out of bad luck or out of chance or something. No, if it's deliberate, they wanted to do this. So they invented stories. They made up stories. Now, if you're a fiction writer, if you're writing for movies or television, great, invent a story. But if you're a reporter, you should not be doing that. You should be telling people about things that did happen, not things you just imagined up in your own mind. And of course, these stories then drummed up bad feelings. When we drum up something, we're kind of creating something, we're developing it, we're encouraging it, something like that. If you have an idea and your friends are like, I'm not sure about that idea, and you're like, come on, it's going to be great, and we're going to do this, and it'll be fun. You're kind of whipping up their emotions, you're kind of getting them excited or getting them involved. So it's kind of a process to sort of enhance their emotions and maybe get them to do what you want them to do. And then they even wrongly blamed Spain for sinking a U.S. ship. This is the famous case of the USS Maine, which was down there by Cuba. The USS Maine exploded, and many U.S. soldiers, unfortunately, were hurt or killed. But it turned out that it was an accident. It was actually just an accident on the boat, but the newspapers took that accident and blamed Spain for sinking this ship.
Yeah, they blamed Spain, but they wrongly blamed Spain. So this story was definitely a massaging of the truth, a half-truth.
That's a kind way of saying it.
Yeah, they definitely massaged the truth, but by creating that story, they drummed up, they created a frenzy. They stirred up a lot of negative emotions against Spain. So when the U.S. went to war with Spain in 1898, many saw yellow journalism as the primary factor. So people found out the truth that actually Spain was not responsible for sinking the ship, as you said. They then realized that yellow journalism was the primary factor. So it was the main reason for going to war with Spain in 1898. So when we blame someone, you're accusing someone, you're blaming them for something.
That's right. But now with the hindsight of history, we know that it's okay to blame the newspapers for this. It's not okay to blame Spain because we know the facts. But of course, sometimes when you don't and you think someone did it, you can still blame them. But of course, the facts might not always agree. So yeah, the war actually occurred, right?
Yes, it did. And
Amazing.
as a result, or largely seen as the result of yellow journalism. So when we see something as a result of something else, we can consider it or we can think about it in a certain way. So when we use see, I often think about the example of parents and their children. For example, my parents still see me as a child and sometimes treat me like one, even though I'm no longer a child.
You're seeing noun as noun, and that's a connection that you might make, but other people might not. So you're kind of explaining that connection in a certain person's mind.
Yeah, that's how people perceive or consider something.
Right. Interesting. Okay, so let's take a break here and we'll look at the second part of our article.
Just as the editors of the New York World and the New York Journal valued profits over truth, so too do many of today's creators of fake news. Fake news websites can make tens of thousands of dollars a month in advertising revenue. And the more views they get, the more money they make. Sadly, fake news spreads much faster than truthful news does. 6 times faster, according to a recent study by MIT.
第二部分我们看到单字 advertising， 这个字是名词，表示广告或是广告业。例如 To get more business, the restaurant started advertising on television. 为了获得更多生意，餐厅开始在电视上投放广告。或是 If you work in advertising, you need to be able to make people want to buy things. 如果你在广告业工作，你必须让人想要买东西。另外补充这个字的动词 advertise. advertise, advertise, 指打广告或是宣传。举例来说 Robert advertised his gardening business on Facebook. Robert 在脸书上为他的园艺事业打广告。也可以说 Phil advertised his services on an online bulletin board. Phil 在网络广告看板宣传他的服务。接着我们看到名词 revenue 表示收入、收益或是税收，像是 Revenue from taxes is used to pay for public infrastructure in the city. 税收用于支付城市的公共设施。或者 In order to raise revenue, the company doubled the price of a few products. 为了增加收益，该公司将一些产品的价格提高了1倍。
So let's look at the second part of our article. It says, just as the editors of the New York World and the New York Journal valued profits over truth, so too do many of today's creators of fake news. Yeah, it's often not about the truth. It's certainly not about serving the public good by keeping people informed and up to date with all the true facts of what's going on. No, it's a much more of a commercial, business-minded concept or plan. It's to sell newspapers, or these days to get clicks, I guess, right? People get clicks on their website, and that leads to dollars and whatnot. So it's all about the money, baby.
Yeah, we think about that as clickbait.
Exactly.
So you've probably heard the expression clickbait, where people deliberately put links on the internet for people to click, and they make it very hard for people to avoid them. And so when you click on that, you get routed to another page, and that page might have some advertising on it. It usually doesn't have what you think on it.
Exactly. As it says in the next sentence, fake news websites can make tens of thousands of dollars a month in advertising revenue. There it is, right there. So they're not selling papers on the streets of New York. They're selling clicks. They're selling views. They're selling eyeballs on a website, on your phone or on your computer. Websites, of course, those are the places that we go on the internet. It could be Yahoo. It could be Google. It could be Amazon. It could be YouTube. These are the places, sort of destinations that you go to on the website. And every time you go on, in some small way, the company might make a small amount of money. And of course, thousands and millions of views can lead to thousands or millions of dollars in advertising revenue. Advertising, when you're selling time on media to give people information about your product. It's those 30-second ads you might see on a television show, those 15 to 30-second ads that pop up when you're watching videos or things like that. And when you're doing that, when you're selling things, you're making money, and that is revenue.
Before, when television was the main medium of spreading news, there would be ad breaks. So you would be watching a movie and maybe an ad for McDonald's would pop up. And so then people would think about McDonald's, and maybe later they'd think, oh, what can I have for dinner? Let's go and get some McDonald's. So the idea is that companies try to sell products by advertising them. So the more people see their ads, the more people are likely to buy something from their company.
Exactly.
So if lots of people visit a specific web page, so when you go on Google and you find a web page, www something, and you look at that web page, advertisers try to put their product on that web page. And if that web page is getting a lot of clicks, a lot of traffic, that means more people will see the advertisement. That means that the owner of the web page will make more money, will make more revenue.
That's right. And it says, and the more views they get, the more money they make. That's as simple as it gets. Sadly, fake news spreads much faster than truthful news does. 6 times faster, according to a recent study by MIT. Ooh, that's a scary statistic. I heard an expression the other day, the lie is running down the street while the truth is still getting its shoes on, or something like that.
There might be a slightly more colorful
I think
part
there is
to
a
that.
slightly more colorful version. But basically, yeah, when you hear something sensational, exciting, did you hear? It's going to be much more fun to tell your friends about it than something kind of boring and truthful. So it's true, but that's interesting. MIT, that's of course the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a very well-respected American university. They discovered through a study that it happens 6 times faster. That's pretty dangerous when you think about it. I mean, it's okay if it's celebrity gossip, but if it's about something really important, a crime or something that happened in the corridors of power among presidents and whatnot, that's kind of scary that the fake news, the lies, basically spread 6 times faster than the truth. All right, we're going to take a break here. We got the third part to check out, so let's listen to it, and then we'll be back.
But will today's fake news crisis, like the yellow journalism craze, also one day pass its peak? Indeed, more and more social media users are learning how to identify fake news. One thing is for certain, though. As long as there's a profit to be made from spreading lies, truth will always have to compete to be heard.
第3部分我们看到单字 craze， 这个字是名词，指风行一时的事物或是狂热、时尚。举例来说 ，This video game has caused a craze among young people。这款电玩游戏在年轻人中引起了热潮。也可以说 ，This new style of sunglasses is the latest fashion craze。这种新款太阳眼镜是最新的时尚热潮。最后我们看到动词 identify， 表示辨识、分辨、发现或是确认。例如 The scientists could identify hundreds of different kinds of plants。科学家可以辨识数百种不同种类的植物。或是 The problem needs to be identified first before it can be fixed。这个问题需要先确认才能解决。
All right, so we are back. We're coming to the end of day 2 of our look at yellow journalism. Let's see how it's going today. I'm afraid this is not going to be that good. So the next sentence says, but will today's fake news crisis, like yellow journalism craze, also one day pass its peak? Good question. Well, it's true. I think after the experience of the Spanish-American War, standards at American newspapers went up. People kind of got a little more aware, a little more educated and knowledgeable about the difference between fake and real news. So will the peak pass? Will fake news pass its peak? Will we kind of get over this mountain and end up in a happier place where true news becomes more widely accepted or more widely read, and we get over this yellow journalism craze, or the fake news craze, as we would call it today? A craze, it's kind of like a fad. It's a fashion that sweeps the society very, very quickly. Suddenly everyone's doing it, talking about it, engaged in it. Even if you're not, you heard about it somewhere. And then just as quickly as it came, it kind of goes away. Remember Pokemon Go?
Oh, yeah.
A couple of years ago, everyone was standing in the hot sun with their phone. You don't see that much anymore, but man, that was a craze.
Yeah, and we also get dance crazes, and I suppose the most popular craze that's kind of sweeping the world right now is the K-pop craze. You know, K-food, K-music.
K-everything.
K-everything, exactly. Right, but I'm wondering myself whether we are one day going to pass its peak, because the next line reads, indeed, more and more social media users are learning how to identify fake news. That is a good thing, but it's taking a lot of time, and it does require some skill. I don't think it's that easy to always separate the fact from the fiction or the fake from the true.
Yeah, it requires skill, but it also requires a desire to do it. Because a lot of people, I think, enjoy the fake news because it reinforces their beliefs. It makes them feel good about what they think in some kind of way. And if you challenge your ideas, if you challenge your beliefs, that can be an uncomfortable thing for people. But you're right. I think I've seen more articles recently saying, check the source. Type type in the information, see if another news source also gives you the same information, and people are getting a little more knowledgeable, a little more wise about this type of thing. Identifying something is being able to see it and know what it is.
When you see it, when you spot it, you know exactly what it is. You realize that this is not the real thing. This is, in fact, fake news. You're able to identify it.
Exactly the same way you would be able to identify people you know, but other people, never seen that person, they're a stranger, I don't know their name, I can't identify them. One thing is for certain, though, as the article concludes, as long as there's a profit to be made from spreading lies, truth will always have to compete to be heard. That's a depressing truth because, yes, of course, clicks, eyeballs on websites drives money, and money drives content. And if the content is selling, even if it's fake news, it's going to be hard to kind of break that addiction to the money that it brings in. But hopefully, people will be able to educate themselves and get better information because fake news has led to all sorts of problems, and that is not something that is good for society as a whole. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. So we're going to wrap it up, and now it's time to go and listen to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第2部分有一句写到，假新闻网站每月能赚取数万美元的广告收益，文中用到 tens of thousands of dollars 来表达数万美元。那这边我们来学习相关的数量表达法。好，当我们说 hundreds of 就是数以百计的，好几百的， thousands of 是数以千计的，好几千的， millions of 是数以百万计的，好几百万的，还有像 dozens of 是指数十个的，好几打的。那接下来就稍微复杂一点了，如果是 tens of thousands of 是指数以万计的，好几万的， tens of millions of 那就是数千万的， tens of billions of 这是表达数百亿的，还有像 hundreds of thousands of 是指数十万的等等。那这些用法呢，它们后面是要接复数可数名词，只是要特别注意，有时候这些用法并不代表实际估计的数量，而是在强调数量非常多。好，那我们也来补充几个跟 million 相关的常见片语咯。第一个叫做 not in a million years， 那就是这辈子都别想，门儿都没有。好，那么第二个补充的是 one in a million， 百万中的一个，那就表示它是非常特别的人或是事物。那么第三个是 thanks a million， 感谢100万，那就是有感激不尽的意思咯。好，第四个 feel like a million dollars 或者是 feel like a million bucks， 表示感觉很棒，就相当于 feel very good。所以当你说 I feel like a million bucks， 我感觉好像是100万美元，那就是我感觉非常棒的意思了。好，另外课文用到单字 revenue 来指收益，我们来学它的字首字根。首先 vent 和 venue 这一类的字根表示 come， 它有来、到来、出现的意思。像 event 这个活动事件这个字啊，还有 invent 发明这个字，它们其实都跟到来出现有关，所以应该很容易看出这个字根的意思。在 revenue 这个字当中，它的字首 re 表示 back 往回，那么 venue 表示 come 到来。从字面意思来看，它就表示 come back。那么 revenue 其实就是用来表达因为投资而在回收的收益，可以拿回来的收益收入了。好，我们顺便补充几个有这一类字根的单字。第一个是 advent advent， 它的字首 ad 表示 to 朝向，那么字根 vent 表示到来，那么从字面意思来看就是 come to 嘛， advent 它就有问世出现的意思。第二个补充的是 prevent，它的字首 pre 表示事先，在点点点之前，那么字根 vent 表示出现，在某事物出现之前，你就先干预来阻止它发生，这样应该很容易联想到 prevent 它有阻止、防止、制止的意思。 第三个补充的是 intervention， 它的字首 INTER 表示在点点点之间，字根 VENT 表示出现，那么 ION 是名词字尾，出现在点点点之间，出现在点点点之中，去表达说介入其中嘛，所以 intervention 就有干预介入的意思了。好，那么以上是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天单字吧。
Deliberately. Harriet was deliberately trying to make her sister's boyfriend feel unwelcome. Website. There is a lot of useful information on that website. Advertising. Paula got a job at an advertising agency when she graduated. Revenue. Peter has multiple streams of revenue, so he'll be fine if he loses his main job. Identify. The tourists were asked to identify which suitcases were theirs.
Discussion starter starts now!
And to that end, we have our discussion starter. What can a person do to avoid being tricked by fake news?
Well, to avoid being tricked by fake news, you can read multiple news sources or websites, or you can watch multiple websites depending on the medium, if it's video or print. And definitely don't rely on social media for your news, because on social media you'll mostly find opinions.
That's true. Your Uncle Joe's Facebook page is not as reliable as the New York Times or something like that. Even though your Uncle Joe might be a great guy, we're not sure where he's getting his news from. And real proper news departments, newspapers, they have standards. They don't print things unless they have, confirmation and backup and things like that. Whereas anyone with a computer can create a very professional-looking news website, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is really a professional organization. So yes, check your sources. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I'm Candice.
See you next time.